Howdy, partners. Oh, no. That's how this episode is starting today.
Howdy.
Welcome to NG Plus. I am Sydney Goodman. I'm joined by Jana Garcia, Josh Dew, Tom Marks. Hello, everyone. Lots of news today. Some big stuff. Don't know if you've heard. So let's just jump straight into it. Halo Infinite's delayed to 2021. So the upcoming Halo East sequel from 343 Industries will not launch alongside the Xbox Series X as Xbox had previously planned. Xbox did not confirm a new release window other than next year for Halo Infinite, explaining that the delay comes as a result of, result of multiple factors that have contributed to development challenges, including the ongoing COVID-related impacts affecting us all this year, which I think is understandable. If you want to read the full statement, they have it on Halo's Twitter account, like the official Halo Twitter account, literally at Halo. But we're not going to read the whole thing because you can read. So let's just jump into this. Actually, I'm going to go first. I'm a huge Halo fan. You can't even see it because my chair is so large. I'm a huge Halo fan. Just there it is. But I'm bummed. I think that it is for the best, though, if a developer decides that their game's not in a place to be released on the timeline that they have set out to the public. I trust their judgment. I cried, no joke, for 2 hours when I couldn't get into a matchmaking game when they released Master Chief Collection, and I would prefer not to relive that. So while it is a bummer, I am fine with it, I guess. I'm more wondering, and we'll get to this part of the conversation in a second, but more wondering what this means for the Xbox Series X and that release. But as far as the delay goes, Janet, you're wearing a Podcast Unlocked shirt. How are you feeling about this Halo delay?
This delay is absolutely brutal. Like, there's no other way to state it without just completely sugarcoating it. It's launching without its big title. Like, for the longest time, people always drag Xbox and Microsoft for not having the exclusives, and that's still definitely a problem even now as they're trying to acquire more and more studios. But the narrative around Series X has been, well, we know we're playing Halo at launch. We know we have the new Halo game. There's still Halo. Can't wait to play. It's like all been Halo. They kind of put all their eggs in this basket, and then the basket ripped from the bottom. So that's it. Like, there's not anything else to. The main thing people were looking forward to, obviously, if you have a PC, you could have still played it there, was the idea of playing the new Halo game on the best hardware in the console market possible that Microsoft had. That's no longer going to be the case. So it's like, why am I going to sit here with this console if I know, like, one of the big incentives is now gone, and there weren't really any incentives to begin with. So it's just like, it's absolutely catastrophic. That being said, I do think that, like you said, Sid, if it needs to be delayed, it needs to be delayed. And sometimes you just can't make it happen. And that's fair, but that doesn't mean it's still not horrible news. Like, I think you can say this was the right decision while still acknowledging that this is a massive L.
Yeah, no, I think that's dead on, Janet. It's like, this is really, really bad for Xbox, right? Like, it is really bad for the Series X, I think. But like you said, I'd rather the game be delayed and need to be delayed. It just, like, the implications of it, even if it's a smart decision and the right decision, and I don't fault Microsoft for it, I don't fault the developers for needing more time, all of that stuff, like, it's still just really not good, like, friend of the show, friend of IGN, Paris, on Twitter at one point said, like, he put it really clearly where he was like, he thought that this was, like, the most important game in the history of Xbox, right? Because like you said, they're putting so many eggs in this basket, and if it all falls apart, like, or if it doesn't look good or whatever, like, that's a really big deal. And now, instead of it just being like, oh, well, maybe Halo Infinite underperformed or wasn't as good as we were all hoping, it's like, it just doesn't exist for that launch window anymore, which is, like, huge and totally unexpected to me, even if I understand kind of post-mortem why it happened.
Yeah, Josh, how are you feeling?
I mean, like, game delays are always usually for, fine-tuning and whatnot. So I think that's the only positive we can see out of this is, like, okay, at least they're not going to, launch with an incomplete game, which would be really bad.
Yeah.
Imagine if, Xbox Series X launched with Halo and Halo was just like a massive flop, and it would just, like, it'd be memed, to the end of time, and so
it would be worse.
It'd be
Or
worse.
would
Yeah,
be worse.
'cause
I think that's a good point. It would be much, much worse.
much worse. This is different than like a movie delay. Movie delay is like, well, it's the same movie, it's just coming out later. But for a game delay, it usually means it's going to be better than it was going to be had it launched the original day.
Yeah.
And you were saying, Janet, earlier that like this is like Xbox's big launch title, right? And I'm trying, like, I mean, in going to Xbox versus PS5, like what are the PS5 launch titles exclusive besides like Miles Morales, I guess?
Miles
Miles Morales is their big one.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the biggest one.
Has that been confirmed as like launch for sure? They've said
It's
launch, but I
holiday
think they just
2020.
Yeah.
they're sort of,
Yeah.
and it's kind of funny too with like the whole COVID situation and just all of the drama happening with the market right now. I think everyone is afraid to make a declaration like that because you will end up in the situation that Microsoft now finds themselves in. So PS5 and Sony, they're playing it very close to the chest. We know what we'll be playing first on the PS5, but the day when we open up that box and set it up and wait for like, hours of it to update, what are we going to end up playing? We don't exactly know. We think we know and we have a good idea, but they haven't really announced that either. And I'm wondering if it's because they have the same concerns that Microsoft kind of fell victim to.
So
Yeah.
I don't have the PlayStation games pulled up here, but I do have the Xbox list in terms of confirmed games with associated release dates. And Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is on both PlayStation and Xbox. Let's see. Cyberpunk is playable but won't be optimized. Dirt 5, Dragon Quest, Forza. I think Forza will probably pivot to being like their premier launch title, I would imagine.
And something that's at least worth bringing up is like I think it was the AV Club ran this article recently this week, I believe, that was like about how the PlayStation 2's launch lineup was like one of the worst launch lineups in the history of consoles, right? And like that's not what you remember about the PlayStation 2.
Right.
And obviously the environment, right, the terrain of games right now is very, very different than it was when the PlayStation 2 launched. But it's totally possible and doable and happens that a console can have a bad launch lineup and end up being well loved and well supported and have all this great sort of games even shortly afterwards sometimes. So like I don't think that we should put stake in the launch lineup of like if they don't nail the launch lineup, they're dead. It just is a huge detriment to have Halo missing. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of Xbox's, I mean, it plays well with Xbox's strategy overall, right? That they're kind of doing this Game Pass subscription style thing where it's not so much about like these brand new things coming out and these big launches and releases. It's like, hey, we just have a ton of games available for you. And so as long as that infrastructure is always there, I think Xbox could see it as like they could, sell it as a win.
I think that's being generous, but I appreciate your optimism.
I'm trying to be positive here. Everyone's being so negative.
Optimism. So something that I saw on Twitter @SidSoGood. Follow me. No, but I actually don't tweet that much, so maybe don't follow me. It doesn't matter. Anyways, I did mention though that who knows? Maybe we get like a Halo Infinite Xbox Series X out of this, which like is great if you're planning on waiting. But then I was trying to be positive really bad, but then it turned into this like, well, if they're going to do that, then I'm definitely not getting it at launch because I don't want to have to get two. And I was like, oh no, this backfired. I was trying to be positive and that's not what I meant. But we do have a commenter. Ari's the Saint said tough decision to make. I'm sure game will be better for it. Respect, which I think we all have kind of come out. None of us are angry about this necessarily.
I think the one awkward thing with the whole, the game's going to be better. Sure, but that still doesn't mean the game will be good, is the other thing we have to consider. Just because it'll be a better version of what's there doesn't mean that it's going to be...
Don't put that in the universe, Janet. I can't handle
it. It'll be better than if it came out in November.
Like, oh, you should have saw what we were going to put out.
They released the day that they released it. They released like the footage from where the game was at when it was supposed to come out, and they're like, "Look, it could have been this. That was better." But speaking of Xbox, so while Halo Infinite has been delayed to sometime in 2021, which what if it's like December 31st, 2021? That's not going to happen. But what if it's like literally delayed a year? That would be a huge
Wait. You can't get mad at Janet for putting out Maybe It's Bad and then be like, what
oh, no, you're right.
Like, we're going to need a lot more time. A lot. Years.
But okay, the Xbox Series X is confirmed for November release window, which I think it's really interesting that they put this information out at the same time. But they did not specify an exact release date for the Series X because why would they? Microsoft narrowed its launch window down from holiday 2020 to November for a global launch of the Series X. Microsoft has also promised that over 100 games optimized for Xbox Series X, either released across generations or developed exclusively for Xbox Series X, will be available before the end of 2020. Here's a quote for you. Quote, more than 50 new games planned for this year across generations and optimized for Xbox Series X, including Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Dirt 5, Gears Tactic, Yakuza Like a Dragon, Watch Dogs Legion. With smart delivery, you only have to buy these games once to play the best version for your console across generations. New games developed exclusively for Xbox Series X launching with Game Pass include The Medium, Scorn, that like really disturbing looking game, Tetris Effect Connected, and more. More than 40 popular games newly optimized include Destiny 2, Ori, and The Will of the Wisp, which is so good. I just started it last week. Forza Horizon 4, Gears 5, Madden NFL 21, and more. So that sounds like some nice PR jargon if I ever heard it.
That's a calculated announcement, right? Like we were all assuming November anyway, and it's exciting to finally hear November, but this is 100% a calculated damage control announcement because they know that the Halo news is such a blow that they're like, don't worry, look at all these games we got. You're still going to be able to play this stuff. And while I think it's kind of not totally fair to be like, look, you can still play all of these third-party games that are coming to every system on your Series X. I think that's sort of like not like that doesn't pull much weight in my book, but them being like, you could buy it on your Xbox One and then whenever you do get a Series X, it'll be waiting for you ready to go, higher quality. Like that is a decent pitch, right? To say, you know what? Maybe you're not happy. There's no Halo. Maybe you want to wait on the Series X. Maybe understand that these games will still be there waiting for you if you're part of this system where you don't necessarily get that with Sony, right? So that is a hook that is like an interesting thing, but this is 100% them trying to win back ground that they just majorly lost, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Janet, how are you feeling about them putting their feet in the sand? It is coming out in November.
I really wish they gave a date. Where's the date? Give me the date. So that's a little bit frustrating, but at least they're like slowly getting closer to a date, and hopefully a price as well, because how much money do we need for these consoles? We still don't know. Is there another SKU? We kind of know, but I'm still frustrated by the little bits of information that we're missing. I feel like this wasn't even so much a damage control announcement. I think it was just to get ahead of the inevitable question of, if Halo is delayed, does that mean the Series X is delayed? So they kind of, I think, put this out there. Phil Spencer already went on record and said that nothing can delay the Series X, like no game would delay it. And then Halo ended up getting delayed and it's still not delayed. So that tracks with the marketing they had in place. And I think this was just them saying, hey, we are still showing up. We'll be there November. Here's a recap on what you can have. I do really appreciate smart delivery. I'm someone that buys FIFA almost every year, so it's nice to be able to get that whenever I guess I wouldn't need to buy the original version anyway because I'm getting the console at launch. But if I was someone that was waiting for the launch, it's nice to be able to upgrade that. Obviously, EA sometimes has some weird qualifiers with that. But overall, as a consumer, I really like what Microsoft does. Obviously, that's their biggest strong suit. So it's nice to be reminded of like what they do have to offer. And it makes sense for them to be showcasing that, especially in a time where they just sort of have this gaping space that Halo just left. They kind of have to double down. Now they only have this. So they're like, all right, these are the games. This is what we're offering. This is what smart delivery brings to the table. It makes sense just to get ahead of everyone's inevitable questions.
So do you think that they should have just given a date, like in their tweet or however they announced this? Like, do you think that would have been more impactful, or just as a consumer, like it would be nice to know But from like a marketing strategy standpoint and doing
Yeah.
damage control, do you think that they should have been like, it's coming November, whatever?
I think
Yeah.
it's always scary to like put a date out there because what if something goes wrong? And I think at this point, Microsoft can't afford to make another big mistake. This is already turning into a bit of a disaster in some ways. Not to be dramatic, but like it's the beginning of like this kind of unraveling in a really messy way. And we saw this with the launch of the Xbox One. Like this is it repeating itself. They can't mess it up, so I think it makes sense to play it more close to the chest. But yeah, I want a date. I want a date and I want a price. And I want to know what your other model is if you have one, which you do not.
It's delayed.
maybe?
Just kidding.
Like those things still frustrate me as a consumer. I can't really speak to the marketing aspect without having more knowledge of how the market functions.
Josh,
Well,
what's up?
if they're worried about, you know, announcing a release date, not sticking to it, just say November 30th. Like you're saying November. Just pick the last day of November. And if
They have
you
all
go
30
past
days.
that, you screwed up already. Like you're gonna screw up no matter what. But I think if they did put out an exact date, that probably would have, you know, thrown a little bit of like heat away from the Halo news for sure. Like everybody would be talking instead about now we have an Xbox Series X release date instead of everybody focusing on the Halo delay. It's just like saying it's confirmed in November is such like a soft like, hey, you know,
Like,
it's
obviously.
like right. It's like the fries that I got with my combo meal. You know, it's like yeah, I know, like I was gonna get that anyway. But it's just like just give me a date. Yeah, I just want a date.
But here's the thing about marketing in this day and age is like news goes so fast, everything churns and just goes and goes and goes. So it's not as much about like dropping the big bomb right away that everyone will pay attention to long term, because that's just not how the world works right now. And instead it's become this game of like how many marketing beats can you have total? Because every time you get a marketing beat, you get more news stories for that cycle. And then you go to the next one. So like the window is holiday. Then you get November. Then you get the date, right? That's 3, rather than just like if you did the date right away, you'd only get 1. If you did holiday, then the date, you'd only get 2. And like that's the same reason that we're getting things like Rocksteady being like, hey, we've got a game announcement coming next week. Right? Because the announcement of the announcement is, and I'm not calling out Rocksteady specifically, like everyone does this, right? Call of Duty is doing this. Everyone does this now. It's the reason they do it is because the announcement of the announcement, as stupid as that is a news beat for them. And then the announcement is a news beat for them. So you get 2 for the price of 1. And I think that's what they're doing here is like saying November is not going to diminish the impact of saying what day in November later.
Right. But here's the thing, like just because I understand it doesn't mean I like it.
Yeah,
that's so evergreen.
Yeah. I think that goes for a lot of what we're talking about here, because it's like the Halo thing. Like I understand it, but I definitely don't like it.
You know what? I don't like it. I wish they didn't.
So here's a question that is oversimplified. But my initial reaction, which nobody actually cares about this, but I'm going to tell you anyways. So I was filming The Fix when this news dropped. And again, if you don't know, like I'm diehard Halo. This is something that I've been looking forward to for a long time. My brother texted me. It was like, Halo's delayed. And I was like, you're kidding. And then I looked. And so in the Fix footage today, it's like me, like basically just like for 3 minutes. I felt really bad giving it to the editor, but I was just like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Anyways, my initial reaction was, oh my gosh, should they just delay the Series X? And we've established, I mean, Janet, you brought up that Phil Spencer definitely said that's not happening. But let's just live in this hypothetical world for a second, in this oversimplified world where there's not like budgets and people needing revenue and like tons of teams and jobs at stake. Do you think that this is enough for the Xbox Series X to like, is it a better choice for the console to be delayed with Halo? I'll leave that to anybody who wants to grab it.
No, only because I don't know who said it on Twitter, but I saw someone mention that Microsoft, when people were going next gen console shopping, there needs to be a Microsoft option on that shelf if they want to sell consoles. So for that reason alone, no. But it's an awkward situation.
I totally agree with that, but also I think that, like, again, Microsoft's strategy this gen has been very different from past gens and very different from what Sony's doing, right? Like they're approaching Xbox as this living platform, and they're trying to break down the walls of like, this is the gen thing that you're going to own for 7 years, and then we'll make another one. And I think that them delaying, I think one of the reasons Phil was probably so steadfast beyond what Janet said, which is you need the box on the shelf, is also that like the software coming later still fits in line with that philosophy of like, you know what, this is a living, breathing platform. We're not going to be like, they needed Halo to make an impact, and they still do, I think, but they don't necessarily need Halo to be right there at launch in terms of that strategy of like, we're in this for the long haul, and we're kind of changing our thinking about where and how you're going to be playing games. Because you could get Game Pass and play, you know, potentially one day play Halo on your phone and never own a PC or an Xbox. And probably Microsoft, it sounds like, will be okay with that, right? That's a very, very different world that we live in now.
Mm-hmm. Josh, any thoughts?
Agreed with everybody.
I love it. You love to see a simple answer for, oh shit, I'm gonna say simple answer for a simple guy, but that's calling you stupid. I don't mean that. I'm so sorry. I'm like turning red. I'm so sorry. I did not mean very well. Anyways, okay, so we talked a little bit about the Xbox Series X lineup, and I'm going to read off what we have confirmed for PlayStation. And then, as much as I hate fanning the flames of like, which console's better, but let's talk about the lineups for a second. So with PlayStation 5, in terms of we're looking at holiday 2020 releases, not just like games that are being made for PS5. Bug Snacks, munch. October, Dirt 5, which we already said that's a third-party game for both. Godfall is one, but again, that's not exclusive. Yeah, that's. I'm not
so
seeing very many
exciting.
exclusive things.
Yep.
Well, we know Ratchet and Clank is coming, but there's no date on that, so I'm just going to assume that that's not holiday 2020. The only holiday 2020 exclusive is Spider-Man Miles Morales, which that's interesting. Given, I don't know, I think in my head it was like, oh, no Halo, like there's no way to compete with PlayStation's lineup. But really, their lineup is just as thin. So does either console launch look, if you had to choose, which console launch looks stronger to you? I'll start with you, Janet.
PS5, because it, to some degree, I guess, exists more or feels more like a little bit newer. It's never really that exciting to like I can play this older game on the same console, whether that's a port or smart delivery or whatever you want to call it. But inherently, launch lineups, even when they're good, they're rarely that exciting. Like even the really strong ones, like you think of like Switch launch with Breath of the Wild, like one of the best games ever, right? One of Nintendo's most successful games, et cetera, et cetera. It's still just one game. I mean, it was an awesome game, and I hope it's all you needed because it's all you got. You know, it's one of those situations. So. Yeah, like
don't forget about
never...
1-2 Switch. All right.
1-2 Switch. And
don't
I think
forget about 1-2
Super Bomberman. Super Bomberman, that was there. Yeah, you could play Snipper Clips.
Oh yeah.
You know, who could forget? Anyway, but yeah, I guess PS5, but they're right, but they're never that exciting. I think what's more exciting about getting PS5 in general is because it has just a better. It has exclusives, so it's more if you can only get one and you want to play more games and you're open to those kind of like a wide variety of genres, it just makes sense to go with PS5 because you might already have a PC or if you already have an Xbox One, you are covered. So that's the main reason that I like lean towards PS5. If I only could get one, I'm gonna get both, so it doesn't really impact me that much. But yeah, that's how I feel.
I got you, Josh. How are you feeling? Which lineup is looking stronger to you?
I mean, there's nothing exclusive on Xbox that I feel most strongly about than like Spider-Man. I mean, Spider-Man is just like a really solid, fun game. And if that doesn't even come out at launch for PS5, like I probably won't get a PS5 at launch. Like I'm one of those like late to the party gamers where I don't really play games until there's a copy available at the office for me to borrow.
You're speaking to my philosophy. I feel that. Tom, what about you?
I know personally that I'm only going to get a PS5 because I have a PC that can run anything that the Series X is going to get, right?
Oh,
So like
fancy.
I'm still I'm still excited for things like Halo, not at launch anymore, but I am still excited for a lot of Xbox.
Oh, the dagger. You have to add that in.
Wow.
I am still excited for a lot of like Xbox exclusives, right? Because it's that word is varying now. I'm just going to play them on PC. So I'm like, I think the PlayStation 5 lineup for that reason, gives me more of a reason to care about it, right? But I don't necessarily think either one is blowing me away right now. And that's also a symptom of like, I've spoken about this before, but this is a very different console jump than we've seen in previous years and in previous times. Like when the Switch came out, it was basically like a lifeboat for Nintendo fans to get off of the Wii U, right? Like everyone was ready for the next thing. Meanwhile, PlayStation and Xbox fans alike are still looking at their Xbox One and their PS4 and going like, well, on PS4, I'm getting Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us, and on both, I'm getting, Cyberpunk. Yeah, like you're getting all these games in 2020 that are still cool. Like we're getting Avengers, right? Like this is one of the biggest moments I can remember with the new console cycle where neither lineup is really enticing me out the gate because the current things are still exciting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But like, what's the alternative, right? You like stop making cool games for a few months so that your your new console looks a lot nicer. I don't know.
It doesn't make sense. It's just like we've hit a plateau a little bit where like these current consoles are still pumping out cool stuff. And when you have stuff like the Halo Infinite, and I don't mean to rag on Halo Infinite because I think a lot of this criticism was a little bit unfounded, but like when you have people looking at the Halo Infinite reveal and going, well, that doesn't even look like how I expected next gen to look, right? It's hard to convince people that, you need to abandon your current system.
And I think that's what's
They
interesting
should have read
about
your article. Sorry.
Yes,
had a very good article.
Y'all can still read it, and it was good. And that's all I'm going to say about that article. It was really good.
We can move on from that.
May or may not be accurate. We'll see. Anyway, but yeah, I think that's a really good example, right? Like that was sort of a lot of people were talking about that this Halo delay in conversation with the reactions online to the footage and the idea of it not blowing you away or not seeming like it's next gen. I think one thing that is in next gen's favor is that people just like new stuff. New stuff's exciting, and I think what PS5 is doing really well is that they really are trying to emphasize what about their console is new, even if it's just new for the sake of being new. I think their emphasis on the DualSense 5 is really leading the way in that versus you look at the Microsoft route. It's once again two just very different approaches. They're like, you can still use some of your controllers on there, and it's all kind of just in that ecosystem, right? Over and over again. While the marketing for PlayStation is, hey, we're off that PS4 stuff. We're on PS5 now. We got a new controller, new stuff. It's white. It looks like a weird old spaceship, what we thought the future would look like in the 90s. Let's go. And they're really pushing that narrative really heavily. But the pro of that is it makes me feel like when I get a PS5, I'm jumping into a new, fresh experience with a whole new library of games, while the Xbox Series X is a lot more of me upgrading in a way that, the reason console players aren't PC players is because we don't feel like upgrading pieces and parts. That's at least how I feel about being a console gamer. And like, I love consoles because of the identity and the unique identity those consoles have. And I will say, as much as I'm going to get the Series X at launch, it doesn't have that. It's just like a better machine that's sort of offering the same as everything else. And I think it's going to struggle to have that distinctive feel that me as a console gamer appreciates when I'm looking at the hardware that I have and the games I have and the memories I've formed with those machines.
No, I mean, upgrading PCs isn't fun. Look, I ordered some RAM and it came up all jacked up, and now I have to get Amazon to replace it, and it's turned into
it's like really high stakes Legos.
When I'm just shoving things in a case. Not that hard. But speaking of things that, oh, dang it. What's something that doesn't have an X in it is Bioshock. So the next Bioshock won't take place in Rapture. It's not taking place in previous settings, Rapture or Columbia, if recent job listings are any indication. Cloud Chamber has several job listings that seem to hint at what the team is looking to do with the next game of the series. The listings ask for experience with Unreal Engine 4 and experience in scripted cinematic sequences, amongst other things. The listings also mention a new and fantastical world. A senior cinematic artist job listing mentions Wes Anderson-like precision and panache in New York. Panache?
Yes.
Don't ask me. It's not my job to pronounce things correctly. That's not why I get paid. It's part of my job. In your camera positioning and movements and the ability to create and implement systemic, in-game scripted cinematic sequences. Okay, so I know, Tom, you are out of all four of us. There's four of us. Out of all four of us, you are Mr. Bioshock today. So does this excite you? What do you want to see from the next Bioshock? How are you feeling?
Yeah, no, this is fine to me. Like it's
always exciting.
Well, it's always hard with job listings, right? Because you never are sure. Like, probably this is the next Bioshock, but Cloud Chamber could be working on something else we don't know. Like, this could be some experiment they've got cooking up. That said, also, like, scripted cinematic sequences and a fantastical world and, like, all these sort of descriptors are just like, yeah, that sounds like Bioshock. So, like, it doesn't really give us a ton to go off of. What I will say is, like, I'm pleased that they're trying something new, because I think what is so appealing about both the original two Bioshocks and Infinite, like, the thing that people remember about those games more than anything else is the world, right? Mm-hmm. It's the city. You think Bioshock, you think Rapture, right? You think Infinite, you think either, like, warped dimension stuff or that floating city in the sky, right? Like, that is the defining factors of Bioshock. So to hear that for Bioshock 4, or whatever it's going to be called, right? To hear that they're going to go somewhere new, they're going to do something else is very, very appealing to me, because I am excited to see whatever world they can come up with, because they've shown 2 times in a row that they can come up with some really, really cool worlds. So yeah, I'm very excited by that part of it. Also, without getting into Infinite spoilers, but it's been a while, like, they did set up very explicitly in Infinite that, like, there are basically the multiverse, right? And there's similar, they have this thing, right? There's always a man, there's always a lighthouse. There's these things that are kind of staples through the first game to the second game in those worlds. So they have a really cool base of, like, okay, how do we take this formula and tweak it more? So yeah, I'm very excited by that idea, even though we know essentially nothing about it beyond that.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up that it's like a job, the reminder that it's a job listing. And when you think about how many iterations and changes there are throughout, like, a game's development, and this is literally like ground like -3 to have a job listing and the description, there definitely could be a lot of changes, but people seem to also be excited, Tom. Sir Dan357 on IGN says it's either space or subterranean. You can't really do much else unless they play up the alternate dimensions thing, which again is something you mentioned. And then Ad Feathers also says, so if it's not under the sea or on the air, then it must take place in a massive city on land. Wait. Janet, how are you? Does this excite you? I know we were kind of talking. I mean, I've never played a Bioshock game because when they were popular, I was very scared. Are you excited to possibly play this one?
I feel like I'd want to play all the other ones first, so it's just another assignment for me. But I love my assignments, so let's go. Now it's a challenge to catch up in the series, and for someone that's a little bit more on the outside looking in, it makes me feel like, oh, not only is it worth going back to because it's still like one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time. You know, Bioshock is in our top 100 games list. Forget what ranking it is. And I started the first one for that reason. It's a little bit more incentive of like, hey, this franchise is still going. If you want to jump in, it's still worthwhile, other than just like your own edification and enjoyment of like old games. So that's what's appealing about this to me. But yeah, I kind of was in a similar boat with you. Like, it wasn't really my style when it came out, and then also was very scared. Turns out I'm still scared. That game's horrifying. I'm like a few hours in.
Oh yeah,
it's so scary.
I thought it was just scary because I was like a child wimp, you know. Like, I didn't think it'd still be scary for, like,
years old and I'm
wimpy adult.
terrified. The audio design.
Horror game.
the audio design is it's still really good, and I think it's one of the more palatable horror experiences because it's not like capital H horror, but the audio design is so brilliant because it's like, I don't know if this had to have been intentional, or maybe they just didn't have the ability to make it highly accurate, but you know when things are there, but you don't know where they're coming from, which adds to like your disorientation as a player, and that's just scary because you're always hearing voices, and you're like, is this on top of me? Is it below me? And then you're dead, and it's really scary. So, but yeah, I have to. It has a great environment. But yeah, so should be cool. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep up with what they've established franchise-wise for like making high-quality games. So that's more of the question on can they deliver in a franchise that's so acclaimed despite some points of contingency, I guess, with certain games.
Mm-hmm. Josh, how are you feeling? Are you Bioshocked by this news?
No. I never played a Bioshock game either. It looked too spooky for me. And I also am now surprised to hear that the first one is like legit horror game. And so the jury's out if I'll ever play it. But I remember when Infinite came out, I was like interested in it, and I had friends that recommended it to me. And I was like, oh, I should probably check it out. And for some reason or another, I never ended up checking it out. Tom, would you say that would you have to play the first two to play Infinite?
You definitely don't need to play 2. Okay. No hate against 2, but it is a little bit of a weird sort of like blip in terms of like how it fits into stuff. It's basically just like if you want more of 1, you can play 2 and kind of get a little bit of that feeling. I'll say Infinite stands on its own, but it is a more impactful game if you're familiar with the first one, I guess is the right way to put it. It doesn't require knowledge of the first one, but it is more it ties in certain ways that are very clever and cool. And like I said, like this idea that there's certain similar events happen in different realities, basically, sort of like how it plays. And it's so I would recommend Infinite as a game to play for pretty much anyone right now. And I think Bioshock 1 is a little more dated, but still holds up as well.
Mm-hmm. How scary is it? Because like Until Dawn is probably the scariest horror game that I could play and enjoy myself and not just like not have a good time period, you know?
In Bioshock 1 starts a lot scarier, and then eventually you get like tons of superpowers and high-powered weapons, and like the horror aspect goes away, and instead it's just like there are tense, scary moments in it. Bioshock Infinite is basically not horror at all. It's like I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people didn't enjoy Bioshock Infinite after Bioshock 1 and 2 is because it's a very, very different mood of a game. And again, there are scary, tense moments in it, but like that is a very different vibe, especially because it's, you know, it's not claustrophobic. Like when you're underwater in a contained city and like things are exploding around you, it's very, very tense and claustrophobic. And when you're up in a beautiful sky with clouds around you, it's hard to replicate that feeling.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Yeah, I'm watching this video, the video that we have playing, and I can't believe I didn't think that this wasn't scary, or that it was just because I was a kid, because I'm just looking at it and I'm like, no, this is still scary. It's a lot for me. But we have another story that actually, oh my gosh, this is so long. I don't know that I really want to go through the whole thing, so we'll touch on it very lightly before wrapping things up. But the new Mortal Kombat film has been cast with a K. So the upcoming Mortal Kombat reboot, which is produced by James Wan, who saw Insidious, Furious 7, Aquaman, will be rated R and feature gory fatalities, as you would hope/expect, considering the franchise. But they have cast a bunch of folks, so I'm gonna go through. Oh my gosh, I'm so bad.
You don't have to.
You can Google it. Please Google it, and then you will have context when we talk about this very quickly. Any Mortal Kombat fans, are we excited about this? We also can just talk about the fact that, like, what does this movie need to do to break the curse of not very good video game movie adaptations? I'd be very curious to people's thoughts on that.
Well, has anyone here watched the original one of these?
I have not.
The original Mortal Kombat movie?
Yeah.
Like a million years ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I did a long time ago.
It's your all's time to shine, because I hadn't watched. I feel like this isn't really my style. It seems like it's a little bit, it's a little campy, right? Like it's kind of like, which is a nice way to say that it's not good. But
well, it campy implies a certain intentionality. I think it's being a little generous, maybe.
Yeah, it's not a good movie.
Is it meant to be like? Oh, is it supposed to be like is this reboot supposed to be like leaning into the bad of it and be like kind of a is it a Sharknado scenario? Like what are we watching?
No, I don't think so. I think it'll be a little bit of that because the game is a little bit of that. But like the funny thing about the curse of bad game movies is like frequently when there's a bad video game based on a movie or a bad movie based on a video game, it's because they're taking one story from a medium that it was meant for and trying to just like puzzle piece it into a medium it was not meant for. And the movies and the video games that are based on each other that are best are the ones that are telling completely original stories. And I think that that's something that this Mortal Kombat movie actually has in its benefit, is that they can just write whatever sort of Mortal Kombat story they want. Like they don't need to replicate the in-depth tale of a game, because although Mortal Kombat has pretty deep lore, it like doesn't need to be that.
Yeah.
Like, and so I think this, could have fun with that. I think I'm not familiar with a lot of these actors, but I recognize a few others that are pretty exciting and like pretty cool. And I'm excited to like see how it shapes up. But like you said, Sid, there are some bad video game movies out there, and this does not like necessarily mean, oh, it's going to be great. Right.
The weird thing, I'm like looking at this cast list and it's like so many characters that have, like they're Mortal Kombat characters. So they need screen time. And like, I can't think of a non-video game movie even that has this many characters that can balance it well. And that would be my concern.
Did you not see Valentine's Day, the hit with all of those random actors, the ensemble cast?
Was it good?
Well, no, you don't remember. There was a period of time.
Yeah, but I'm asking if it was good. I'm asking if it was good.
Was not
did it work?
Thing that I've ever watched.
Okay.
Valentine's Day is literally American Love Actually, but bad.
Yeah,
exactly.
So that was my exact concern. Okay, but there are a lot of characters here, and they're all going to be fighting. And but here's the thing: for a Mortal Kombat movie, the only thing they need to do well is good action. I think if nothing else, it just has to have good action, and to have the main name that sticks out for me is Joe Taslim, who is playing Sub-Zero, and he is an Indonesian martial artist. And I first saw him in The Raid, which is one of the greatest action kung fu movies ever. I cannot recommend it enough. It's incredible. And he more recently, he was in a movie called The Night Comes for Us. And I don't know where you can watch it now, but you can watch a scene from it on YouTube, and it is really gory. They're like doing straight up, they're already basically doing Mortal Kombat level types of like gore, but IRL, and it's hard to watch for me personally. Like watching Mortal Kombat footage where like ribs are breaking through their people's throats and out their buttholes or whatever, like that's fine. It's like CGI, and you can just laugh at it. But like seeing it in like nice special effects is like another thing. Anyway, he's great. And if he's in it, I'm excited for it, just because like Mortal Kombat movie just needs to have good action. That's it. That's all I'm asking for. I don't care if like the plot is garbage. If it's like good hand-to-hand kung fu combat with a K, I'm in.
I like it. Good. Staying on brand. So White Mage 79 says that this movie will never come close to the original. So maybe we're all wrong. I would argue it is still the best video game movie of all time. Sorry, Pokemon. Everybody has opinions, and I'm happy that you're typing out yours, my dude. Janet, what's your favorite video game movie? We'll wrap this up with this last question.
I guess it would probably have to be Detective Pikachu. I really haven't watched that many of them because they're just not good. Like no one's like, you gotta watch this. Even with Detective Pikachu, it wasn't like mind blowing. It was just good for what it was, and I enjoyed it. So I'm gonna have to go with that one. Kind of a cliche answer, but I think that's the best one that I've seen so far. I don't know if you count the Pokemon movies, like the animated ones.
Oh, we're poking. We're counting that. Yes.
I guess yeah, I mean, I don't even know if those were good. I was a kid. I mean, it was crazy when Ash tried to fight Mewtwo and got rocked. That was iconic. So that was probably better than anything that happened in Detective Pikachu. Watching him turn to stone, spoilers, that was great. So those are my 2 shout outs.
All right, Tom, favorite video game movie?
I would say Detective Pikachu probably also, but also it's like so hard when the list is so full of bad ones, right? Like
You mean it's not Assassin's Creed? That's fair, Josh.
It's basically like Pokemon and then the Super Mario Bros. Movie in my book, and then like everything else way down.
I've yet to watch Sonic.
Wait, don't no. You guys should be horrified and offended by that.
Tom,
just
happened. You know, unpopular opinions. You know, I'll respect them. You know, I'm not going to argue with you here. If
they canonically established that their names are Mario, Luigi, Mario. How can you not be mad at that?
Speaks to how bad all the other movies are, though. Because I was like, okay, I could see how you could come to that.
Yeah. I haven't yet watched Sonic yet. I've heard Sonic was actually pretty good.
Sonic's fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun movie. It's not bad.
I'm looking at the list on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's like, because I was like, maybe I'm forgetting about a video game movie. And you know what the #1 video game movie on Rotten Tomatoes is?
What?
Player One, Ready Player One, if they count that?
No, they don't count it. It's like based on actual video game IP. Is the Angry Birds movie 2.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, I watched part of
the second one.
It was so bad. It was so bad.
Wow.
Yeah, 73%. Detective Pikachu with 68%. I watched Detective Pikachu. I was whatever about it. I'm not gonna pick any of these options. I honestly like Scott Pilgrim the best. That is one of my favorite movies.
I feel like that's cheating because it just has video game elements in it.
But it's like it's so.
Jumanji's my favorite because they're in a video game.
Well, fine. The answer is none. Then, all right. Hopefully, Mortal Kombat the movie. Hopefully, Mortal Kombat the movie.
Okay.
Forced to pick. I'm gonna pick Spirits Within. How about that? Come at me.
That's actually not a bad pick.
Yeah, Spirits Within.
Maybe this will be maybe the Mortal Kombat movie will be the first movie we watch in theaters when the theaters aren't full of death.
But it will crazy still would that be? Full of death because it's Mortal Kombat.
Yes.
That's the tagline. The theaters are no longer full of death, but we are. Mortal Kombat.
That would be the craziest COVID comeback movie.
We should stop talking now because this is just getting worse as it goes. No, this was a great episode. Thank you so much for everybody tuning in. Don't forget, news, games, and more is every day at 4 p.m. Pacific. So tune in. Well, not every day, but weekdays, Monday through Friday. So thank you so much, Janet, Tom, and Josh, as always. And we'll see you all. This cast will be back next week. But we'll see you tomorrow. But I won't see you. But the people who are on the show tomorrow will see you. So thanks.